Liberating love, a love that sets us free, love that allows us to really be who we are. Earlier this month, we used Bell Hooks and M. Scott Peck's definition of love as something as committing to another human being's spiritual growth, making space for that growth, and also orienting to the growth and the thriving, not just of one other human being, but of the whole, the holy, the world. But what about freedom? The liberation part of that love. What does it mean to be free? In our English word freedom, the word comes from two root words, free and dom, which refers to domination. Being free from domination, that makes sense. But I want to look a little bit more deeply into that word free. So free comes from the Old English word, which goes back to the Proto-Indo-European root of pre. So like the Germanic languages changed the p sound to a f sound, so that root pre became free. And that root word, pre, in Proto-Indo-European, the oldest language that is at the roots of our Romance languages, pre means to love. At the root of the word free means belonging to our loved ones, and therefore not in bondage, not enslaved to something else. Free. So at the root of our human understanding in language, when we belong to one another, it's freedom. Belonging to our beloveds, belonging to love itself, means that we're free from domination. It means that we're not enslaved to some other entity that is not free. So at the root, freedom does not mean the isolation of rugged individualism, nor does it mean freedom from connection. It means that we are free when we belong to each other, when we belong to love rather than domination. So really getting free is about everybody being free from domination. It's not about getting free from the constraints of learning how to live with one another. Because the truth is that we're all connected. There's no such thing as a lone wolf freely floating in space, nor is there any such thing as getting free alone. In human society, we get free together, or we live in domination together. And of course, in a single individual life, it is possible to get free by one's self from a particular domination, to leave an abusive relationship or exit an exploitative workplace, and all of that is a good thing. If you are in a situation that's characterized by domination, it's important to make a plan to change that, whether through leaving the situation or working to transform it from an ethic of domination to an ethic of love. But what I'm saying is that even when we leave a particular situation, and it is a good thing to do so, the world we live in is still set up to enable other situations of domination to continue, whether that's through patriarchy or white supremacy or economic exploitation. Liberation theology, the understanding of the world through the lens of liberation, argues that the holy, however you understand it, is invested in liberation of the oppressed. that God wants the world to be organized by love and not domination. So love works to dismantle systems of domination like racism or patriarchy or the exploitation and abuse of poor or working people. In the United States, Black liberation theology developed in the 1960s when Black Christian theologians said Jesus was oppressed and he was marginalized in his context, and so he came to liberate all people from oppression. In the United States context of white supremacy and anti-Black racism, Black liberation theologian James Cone said that because race is such a dominance marker here in the United States, such a trait of oppression, here in the US, Jesus is Black. Latin American Catholic liberation theology also developed in the 1960s when priests and bishops in Latin America said Jesus was oppressed and marginalized in his context and therefore came to liberate all people from oppression. And so Jesus' ministry was evidence of God's preferential option for the poor. Liberation theology asks us to examine systems of domination in their context, and it identifies God or holiness or the sacred or love with the movement to dismantle domination and move towards organizing our lives by love instead. Freedom, belonging to one another. In this theology of liberating love, there are at least three, there are probably dozens more, but I'm going to name 3 truths. 1, we are all inextricably interconnected in the fabric of existence. You cannot pull us apart from one another. You cannot pull us apart from other creatures or the earth. Our cells are entangled, our breath is intermingled, and our lives depend on each other. We are bound up together. And because of that truth, 2, systems of domination dominate us all. And those systems of domination have a point. They push resources from the oppressed and push them into the hands of the privileged. So the experience of domination is quite different because the resource distribution is pretty different. But domination harms everyone involved. It harms the oppressed in devastating ways. But the bodies and the souls of the privileged are damaged by systems of domination too. So making love the center of our systems instead of domination, it's a healing move for everyone involved. And finally, point number 3, truth number 3, centering the well-being of the most marginalized people in systems of domination frees everybody because it remakes the system in love. If those who are the most dominated get free, then everybody gets free. By focusing our attention on the people who are most marginalized in systems of domination, it helps us understand the ways that the system is working. And that helps us shift to a system that celebrates love and declares love and sees love in action for those on the margins. It can be hard to imagine what a system based on love looks like because most of us don't have a lot of experience in systems like that. Most of us live our lives inside of systems of domination, and we only get little butterfly glimpses of beauty and possibility in systems where everyone has the space and the resources and the freedom to thrive and fly. In Desiree's story, just a little bit of space, just a little bit of sunlight and a shimmering paper and attentiveness to the people in the room and a willingness to let them lead led to a life-changing experience for everyone who was there. And in that small shaft of sunlight, the coming together of a number of different unlikely scenarios, the dream of the holy, the dream of mutual thriving, shone through our regular lives. There were so many things in that story, so many unlikely pieces that all worked together at once, fluttering like a butterfly in a hurricane. There was a dad who turned towards his daughter's curiosity. There was a little girl who was paying attention to everything around her and saw shining beauty in something that a lot of people might call trash. There was love between a parent and a child that led them into curiosity and exploration of what more beauty could we make in the world. There was a waterlogged library book that was still legible so that an origami butterfly might be made. And there was a commitment to art and to beauty that could not be dissuaded by loss or flood. And then, in the learning space, where that beautiful story was told, there was a practice of centering the learners instead of using a learning program that deposits knowledge into people like a bank. There was a metaphor that found its wings in the people in the room, and there was the at-the-moment practice of the very thing that was being studied. The story is simultaneously about being radically present and witnessing beauty in the smallest moments and making space for everyone's witness to show up as a teacher. This is the foundation of what we're trying to do in church. We try to make space to encourage everyone's light to shine, everyone's butterfly of possibility to find its wings. We believe that everyone has a story to tell, a teaching to share, a beauty, a shining piece of paper that will be picked up off the ground and folded into art. In Paulo Freire's landmark book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Freire challenged the foundational ideas about knowledge systems, about teaching and learning. He pushed back against the bank deposit model of learning, where learners are vessels into which teachers deposit knowledge like coins in a bank. Here, take this, now you have it, good. Instead, Freire insisted on the necessity of dialogue in education, conversation in which teachers and learners collaborate to uncover knowledge together. Teachers are still teachers, but they become facilitators. They invite their students to share their own understanding and stories and reality. This pedagogy asks people to observe the world and name their living situations and then talk to each other about what they're witnessing and let that build their understanding of the world and how it works. Now, I am very confident that Desiree is immersed in pedagogy of the oppressed, but in the story that she told, what she actually did was practice it. she stepped aside and handed the mic to Sergio, who then told his story and his understanding of the world, which was so much more beautiful than what she had even imagined, which was amazing. And it deepened and enlivened the experience. In the framework of mutual thriving, people create possibilities together. It is by opening up and making space for all of the participants to share their wisdom and imagination, to see that shiny object lying in the road and pick it up and fold it into art, to bring the possibility that you alone, your unique soul, knows is true, alive in your community. This doesn't mean that there's no structure. There's still a structure. There are still practices that we make this happen in. There's still ways that we set up the conversation. But we make space in the conversation intentionally to bring forth new ideas and new wisdom and new learning, to allow each and every person with their unique and beautiful fingerprint light to shine so that the whole picture becomes more beautiful, more varied, more true. Adrienne Marie Brown calls this practice of emergent strategy shaping tomorrow towards abundance. It means that we make more possibilities simply by making space, by listening to the longing of the child that wants to make new beauty, by handing the microphone to the next person to tell their story, by opening the way for the next leader, the next generation. This is a dramatically countercultural way of learning and of knowing, because it says that there's not one right way. There are many. There are many beautiful right ways, and we flock within them together by learning from one another and allowing our souls to mutually flourish and teach and learn in a butterfly effect that maybe is causing a hurricane somewhere else. We practice this in church. The church structure is a weird one. I know it's weird. I know we're all here doing a weird thing. But it's on purpose. We're purposefully weird. It's because we are trying to bring together our people in a way that focuses on love, centers and enlivens love and mutual and flourishing. This is a communal structure in church. It's not a capitalist one. The goal here is the beautiful, brilliant flourishing of your souls. It's not a profit. And so here we practice making space and inviting all of your flourishing and your wisdom into it. In worship, for instance, we co-create the worship with all of our worship associates. Desiree's story is the one that's grounding this space, because with our worship associates, we make way for multiple perspectives to shine and to lead and to share wisdom. We have our members in our band. We have our musicians here that make music for us every week and share their incredible brilliance and gorgeous, gorgeous harmony with us. And it's such a gift, but all over the church, in many, many places that you don't see, it's just members bringing their beauty and their flourishing. And that happens, with accountants as well as musicians on the finance team and people who are good at organizing and leadership on the board. It happens everywhere because the way that this place is structured is about community and love and mutual flourishing and not about making money. It's about you. Your flourishing is what we're hoping for, and your shared flourishing when you understand that you belong to one another. Every time you show up somewhere with a casserole because somebody is grieving, or every time you carry the offering plate down the aisles to collect money for a community organization, every time you go downstairs and sit with our children and invite them into their future possibilities, you are participating in a communal structure that is based on mutual flourishing. We're practicing. It's not perfect, it's just practice here in church. And you have staff and ministers, but we're facilitators. We're teachers that are building capacity, that are helping create structure and allowing new voices and wisdom and beauty and flourishing to come into it. This is a place we practice trying to center love and flourishing as a model for what we're hoping we all do when we go out into the world as well. So what possibilities are you bringing, either into this space or out into the world? What shiny object do you see lying on the ground that only your vision sees, that you can pick up and fold into a beautiful butterfly to share in community or out in the world? All of our art here, our worship, our liturgy, our music, our storytelling, it's built on the understanding that we're trying to get free together. That we're invested in freedom from domination while also belonging to one another and mutually thriving in a love that liberates and works to get everybody free. May it be so, and amen.